shepherd, for he looks after all the broken and bruised, all the lost and confused. And he calls us by name, and he washes away all our sins, so we bow and surrender to our good shepherd. We are all lost sometimes, and we've all failed to find the joy that is found in Yeshua. But he will come after to where you wander. He will call you back to him and give you peace. Oh, he'll give you peace, for he's our good shepherd, for he looks after all the broken and bruised, all the lost and confused. And he calls us by name, and he washes away all our sins, so we bow and surrender to our good shepherd. Oh, he's our good shepherd. Oh, we may lose a few of those we love and knew, and our hearts may be broken, but he is still working. And this life is a journey, and in the midst of our hurting, he is giving us his love and his mercy. Oh, he's giving us mercy, for he's our good shepherd, for he looks after all the broken and bruised, all the lost and confused. And he calls us by name, and he washes away all our sins, so we bow and surrender to our good shepherd. Oh, he's our good shepherd. Oh, he keeps to his sheep, and he tends to the weak. He leaves the 99 to seek the one who's hard to find. And he calls us his chosen, and he blesses the broken by giving us his grace. Now we follow his ways. He keeps to his sheep, and he tends to the weak. Oh, he leaves the 99 to seek the one who's hard to find. And he calls us his chosen, and he blesses the broken by giving us his grace. Now we follow his For he's our good shepherd, for he looks after all the broken and bruised, all the lost and confused, and he calls us by name, and he washes away all our sins, so we bow and surrender to our good shepherd.
And Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the Virtual House Church. I am your host, Rob Skiba, and I'm excited to be joined once again by John Hall from Now You See TV. Hey, John, how you doing?
I'm so happy it's Shabbat. I am so happy.
Yeah, Shabbat. It's time to rest.
Yeah, it's just time to sit in your chair and go, okay. Oh,
Just
thank you.
take a deep breath.
Well, when you come on, I'm sitting there going, I got my head down, and I'm just sitting here chilling out. I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about anything I have to do except hang out with you tonight.
Well, right on. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We'll jump right in. I'm going to do a screen share here for the people who are joining us for the first time. Welcome to the Virtual House Church. For everybody who's joining us that has been here before, thanks for coming back. The website is virtualhousechurch.com, and if you scroll down in the left-hand menu, we're doing week number 2. This is our second week in the new Torah cycle, and by the way, people have been asking me about the new Genesis workbook. I haven't put an ad on the page here. I still need to update it with the new one. This one is in the King James Version, but if you just go to Amazon and type in Wisdom from the Torah, Book 1, Genesis, and then put WEB edition, that's for the World English Bible Translation, you can check it out and get it on Amazon right there. So I'll eventually put them into the VHC church and put them on the page here. But anyway, so that's that. We'll be going over Genesis chapter 6, verse 9 through chapter 2. And we won't go over all this because we've done it before. So for people who want to do the entire study, just scroll down and you can watch the broadcast from 2013. And of course, look at all the notes and stuff from that year and the previous year from all of the videos we got posted here. It looks like we're going to be talking about Nephilim because it's the flood chapter, and it's also the Tower of Babel chapter. So here are the notes if you want to go through it. Also, early on, I started putting portions from the book of Joshua to elaborate on whatever the story was in Genesis, so you can read the Joshua account here. Quite a bit to read if you want to look at it. So needless to say, there's an awful lot of I got female giants here too. Yeah, were there female giants? Well, there are certainly tall women today, so no reason to believe there might not have been at some time in the past also bigger ones. So anyway, lots of notes for people to check out if you want to do that. But for now, we'll just kind of open the floor for some commentary. If you'd like to comment on this week's portion, just let John know and he can get you a link to join us here. Otherwise, if you're in the chat room, you can post questions or anything like that. So I'll just open the floor, and anybody who wants to say anything, let's jump in.
Well, they're talking about Maccabees right now, but I have, I listened. It was a good, the show you did in 2013 was almost 2 hours long. It was jammed packed because you were reading the parallel out of Jasher, like you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Right. And he got into one of the things, and we had a show earlier in the week, and I was hoping you can elaborate on a little bit more about not all Nephilim result from angel human seed.
Right. Pop your camera back on there, buddy. I'm looking at a logo talking to me.
Yeah, you can't see my mug, can you?
Yeah. In fact, I'll undo my screen share as well.
I'll show my face if you show yours.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. Well, just kind of piggybacking on last week. Certainly, when an angel mates with a woman, you end up with angel-human hybrid. We call it Nephilim. But I believe that the term Nephilim can apply to other things besides just direct angel-human hybrids, because there are at least two ways that you can get a Nephilim, or the Nephilim, that's plural. one is obviously angels mating with women. The other way is if you read Numbers chapter 13, it tells you that these were the giants that they saw in the land, the Anakim. These were Nephilim who came from other Nephilim. So now you have at least two ways. You get Nephilim from angels mating with women, or Nephilim mating with each other, or Nephilim mating with normal humans. So that's at least two. I extend it. That's biblically speaking. You have at least two from the text, the two ways that you can get them. I extend that to a third way, and I believe that is when you corrupt the image, as the title of Doug Hamp's book, his book Corrupting the Image, states that when you blend species together and create a kind that was not originally intended to be, i.e. corrupting that which God already created and established as good and very good, and it said it must reproduce after its own kind. When you corrupt that and you create something that was never meant to exist in the first place, I believe that also qualifies as a third way to end up with Nephilim.
Again, I'm posting the link in the chat room, guys. If you're on YouTube and you're watching live right now, you can go to nowuctv.org, hit the link in the chat room, and you can come in and ask Rob questions on the Torah portion this evening from Genesis 6 on. And I think, like you said, we're going to be going through Joshua chapters 3 and 4 tonight. So I'll be posting the link in the Rumble chat, the private chat on NowUCTV. So if you got a question for Rob, just hit the link and come on.
Yeah, or if somebody else out there has some insights that they would like to share, we'll bring you on and you can talk to us about it.
Susan in the chat room says, in those times God walked with man. At what point did God stop walking with man?
Well, obviously when Adam and Eve sinned, we see a problem. There's a bit of a separation. Although he comes back and he's like, hey, where are you? So he's still there and he's talking with Cain. So, you've got some interaction going on, at least in the early years. I don't know when it very well could be that Genesis 6:3 is talking about that. He says, my spirit will no longer dwell with you. So, maybe it got to the point where his spirit would no longer hang out with us in a physical, tangible way by the time you get to the last 120 years leading up to the flood, somewhere in that time frame. Although we do see his spirit coming back, and we see the pillar of fire, and we see all that at Mount Sinai, so there's a return of that. And of course, with the Israelites in the tabernacle in the wilderness, his presence was there. So, there appears to be a window where I would even say that was a short window too, because Abraham is still having dialogue with him and, having interaction with him directly. But it seems like there's very limited interaction from the time of the flood until Moses. And then there's the whole time in the wilderness where his presence was there with them. But when they get back into the land, it doesn't appear that his presence is physically, tangibly present, visibly, there for very long after they get into the land. Very
good. I have put the link in the chat room, guys. Don't be afraid of Rob. He'll answer your questions. He has to put up with me once a week. So, he's doing good. We got a question from Lorna. I have a question. Genesis 11, the Lord descends to see the city and the tower. It does not say he looked down, but descended. Is this
right?
Translation error?
No, it appears that he did come down, take a look around, I would believe probably in the form of Yeshua, pre-incarnate Yeshua coming down. But, it says he came down and took a look around, and he says, oh, this is what they are, and what intrigues me about that is he says, now nothing they imagined to do would be restrained from them. If you think about what they're trying to do, and the Joshua account that I posted on the page goes into a tremendous amount of detail about what they were planning on doing. The short end of it would be that they wanted to create a tower, reach into heaven. They had 3 camps of people that were divided up under the leadership of Nimrod. One was going to go in and assault the angels. One was going to go in and assault the throne room and kill God, and then set up Nimrod basically as the ruler of the universe. So, that's their plan. I certainly don't believe they could kill God. However, getting into heaven and messing around with the angels, it says whatever they imagined to do wouldn't be restrained from them if they kept going. That's a pretty heavy statement right there, at least in my opinion. So then of course we know that Yahuwah changed the languages, which was a brilliant move, actually. When we're all united together in one language, and we're kind of in that place now, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be the coming of the Son of Man. One could argue that the computer age made it so that we are all of one language. Even though we may still speak English and French and Spanish and German, etc., ones and zeros are still universally understood, and programming for computers is still universally understood no matter what language you read in. The computer syntax is the same. So it could be argued that we're back into one language again. And with computers, it's not that difficult to use like Google Translate or some Babelfish or some of the other tools that are online to translate. You write out a paragraph in English and you can, with a push of a button, have that same paragraph instantly translated into German, French, Spanish, whatever, with these online tools. So we're back in that stage again where we're of one language. So with computer technology, there's no question that knowledge has increased exponentially. We have literally the knowledge base of all of human history at our fingertips, at a touch of a button. Even if it's in another language, we can get it translated into English. So, wow. Look how much knowledge it increases and is shared when we're of one language. Well, just think of, we've degraded to the point where we are now, where we use something like 8 to 12% of our brain. They say, I believe Adam was with 100% of his brain, and by the time you get to the Tower of Babel, they're still using an awful lot of their brain, and they have carryover from pre-flood knowledge and wisdom and understanding still going on. So they were extremely intelligent, far more than we could ever imagine. Probably were able to create and build things that we can't even begin to imagine. We look at so many of the megalithic structures of the ancient world today, and even with all our technology, we still can't figure out how they did it. So they're all gathered together with all this wisdom and understanding under the leadership of one guy. What a brilliant strategy Yahuwah had to, okay, this is what they imagine. If they keep going, we're back to where we were right before the flood. Not good. So there's something like 600,000 people, I believe, on the earth at that time, according to Joshua. So he divides them up into 70 different languages, 70 different people groups. Came out of 600,000+ people. I don't know if that was just men or whatever. So on the low side, you got maybe 600,000. If it's just men, figure maybe double that. Let's say 2 million tops. Women and children and all that. 2 million tops at the Tower of Babel. On the low side, 600,000, split up into 70 different people groups. Well, if you've got the Nikola Tesla and Einstein in your group, awesome, you're doing good. You got Pee Wee Herman, in your group or whatever, your people group's basically going to eventually end up being the ones that just draw pictures in caves until until you guys can kind of catch up, But you can see how, knowledge would take a massive nosedive, because even if you've got smart people in these different groups, you can only communicate within the people in your group. So let's say you've got one or two, brilliant people, or maybe a dozen or more, but the rest of the group, are ignorant sheep herders. Well, you can see how knowledge is going to die out pretty quickly in that group. And if you don't even have smart people in your group, well, you're handicapped all the more. And when you compound it with the fact that these guys can't communicate with the other people, so you got, a bunch of smart people in this group over here, and a bunch of smart people over here, but they can't communicate with each other. They can't understand each other, so they can't share the knowledge anymore. So it was actually a brilliant move on Yahuwah's part to kind of hit a reset button again after flood. And this is not too long after the flood. Let me pull up a chart here. I did a timeline chart. It's available on BabylonRisingBooks.com. I'll do a screen share here. These files are available on BabylonRisingBooks.com. books.com. I'll just use the computer resolution one. Okay, post-flood Noah timeline. Let me click on that one. That's going to open up Photoshop. It's just going to take a second here. Or maybe what I'll do is see if I can open up just in Windows. Yeah, I forgot it's going to take a minute for everything. Okay, here we go. Open with, let's try photo viewer maybe.
Yeah, I grabbed that when you did that panel on Quest for Truth. You offered that for those who were watching that weekend. That's a great chart, man.
Yeah, this is one of two. So you have the flood happening at about 1650 AM or years since creation, or roughly 2350 BC is when the flood is. And Nimrod shows up in 1908 AM, right in here, about 2100 BC. And the Tower of Babel is somewhere over here. So about 950 years or so after the flood, it looks like. No, excuse me, about 350 years after the flood. So 300 to 350 years after the flood is where you have a population of 600,000 men, and they're building the Tower of Babel. So, I mean, it only took them 300 years to start a whole new rebellion.
Right.
After the flood. And this is, don't forget, this is at a time when a generation still living about 500 years. Shem lived to be 600 years old. Arphaxad, his son, lived to be 438. So, you're within one generation or so of the flood. You're still within the generation there of Shem. And you've got this massive rebellion of Genesis 11 taking place.
That's a great chart.
Thank you. Let me pull the other one up here just so people can see what I'm doing with this.
Is that still available, Rob?
Yeah, it's available. If you go to, I'll show people how they can get it if they're interested.
Right.
Just go to BabylonRisingBooks.com, and in the store, they can click on the, it's in the digital section here, digital file downloads. So if they go here to the digital file downloads page, they can get them individually or together as a set. So, and it's an instant download when they do that. So that's how you can get them. Here's the other one. This is the Nimrod Abraham timeline. The other one just deals with the time of Noah. Let me go back to that one. So, this is Noah's life up here, and there's a bunch of scripture references, and it shows the origin of the post-flood giants and all that. That's all right here. So, that's what this one just deals with, because we know that Noah lived 950 years, 600 before and 300 after the flood. So that's what this chart represents right here. Then this one, when I was doing the research on this and realized that just how contemporary Abraham and Nimrod were with each other, Nimrod was born before Abraham was. Nimrod was born in 1908 AM, and Abraham was born in 1948 AM, which is why a lot of people key in on it when they think about 1948 Israel. They'll say, "Well, that's when Abram was born." Well, that would be interesting if only the Israel of today was worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and not having all-seeing eye pyramids and statue of Nimrod outside the Hebrew University and all kinds of iconography pointing to Nimrod in this 1948 established kingdom, when this guy right here, Nimrod, was born made king in 1948. So when he was about 40 years old, he was made king of the world. So, and this chart, goes into a whole lot more detail on all of that. So, a lot of information here for sure.
It's good information.
And there's like a sort of a cheat sheet here in the top right corner that shows the dates of major events. Nimrod born 1908, becomes king 48, Abraham born 48. So you get the timelines of, different things like Genesis 14 war and stuff like that. So it's a quick reference guide right here.
While you got that up, Patricia just shot me a text, and she said, what does Rob think about how Cush became the father of Nimrod, and why Nimrod wasn't the initial listing of the sons of Cush.
I'm not sure what she means by not the official listing, because he is listed as Cush begat Nimrod in Genesis 10, 8, and 9.
Okay, so he is.
Yeah, he's listed as he's. Some people make the case that he may not have been born of Cush and his wife, and they have other interesting theories on that. But we'll just go ahead and look at it. Genesis 10. And it says right here in verse 8, and Cush begat Nimrod. So
it does say it.
Yeah. So I just go with the Occam's razor, right? Simplest solution is probably the correct one.
There you go.
Okay, looks like he begat Nimrod.
It's in black and white, folks. Okay, we've got Samuel that just came on, Rob.
Yeah, bring him on.
Come on, Samuel. How you doing, buddy?
I'm great, John. Shabbat shalom to both of you.
You too.
And first off, I just want to piggyback on what you were saying regarding knowledge, and then state something I'm noticing in the beginning of this Torah portion. But there's a couple theories I have. First off is that in regards to the knowledge that was lost in the flood, I do think that that's beginning at least to make a massive resurgence, especially through the New Age.
Yeah.
Only because you have so many people blatantly communicating with these fallen entities. I was one of them. And they willingly share everything because they want it to be known. They want to be known they want it to be known so they can come back and use our bodies for themselves.
Yeah.
And something regarding that is, I don't think our bodies are actually physically able to handle that kind of knowledge anymore. I think we have actually devolved over time to such a point where our flesh, if we had that kind of knowledge, it would actually manifest in various tics, nervous tics, various eccentricities, which is why I believe there's a massive rise in what people see as autism, because there's just simply too much knowledge being given for people, for their flesh or their bodies to be able to handle it.
That's an interesting insight, although I would link the autism more to the mercury issue and the vaccines and whatnot. But regardless, I think you make a really good point because, genetically we have clearly devolved. I mean, there's all sorts of genetic breakdown in our genome. So yeah, it would make sense that we would not be able to quote unquote handle that kind of information, which is probably why we need computers. I think that the people in pre-flood, everything we're using computers for today, people were using their brains for, I believe in the pre-flood world. Today we have to use computing power. So I think that's why computing power was introduced. Very likely from the fallen ones. I mean, you listen to somebody like Steve Jobs talking about, where he got some of the inspiration for, and the first Apple sold for, I think it was $666, and Apple, with a bite taken out of it. I mean, come on, really? I don't believe the fruit in the garden was actually an apple, but that's kind of universally understood to be, the iconography of the forbidden fruit. So yeah, and you look at everything in World War II, everything that took place with the Nazis and all their occult stuff like that, channeling information and technology and things of that nature. So yeah, I think the fallen ones have given us a means by which we can attain the same or similar knowledge that we had in the pre-flood world, but with being assisted with tools.
Yeah, exactly. Because again, there's simply no way we're able to handle it anymore. We just don't have the capacity. And the whole transhumanist movement with introducing cybernetics, in addition to combining them with the organic components of the human body, I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
And if it's okay, I want to jump into my observation here, if that's fine.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, just the section I'm talking about is 6:14 to the end of chapter 7. And I'm actually curious as to what you think about this, because I'm noticing there seems to be some correlation between the ark, and I'm not necessarily sure if it's the temple, if the ark correlates to the temple that was constructed by Solomon, or if it's pertaining to the Ark of the Covenant itself. And I'm just curious as to your insight on this, because I could see equal equal possibility for both of those being likely.
Well, my take on the tabernacle / temple of Solomon is changed as a result of Andrew Hoy's model in the project314.org, the circular dome tent model, and he believes that, and he's in the process of developing a case for the idea that Solomon's temple was likely in the same shape as the original tabernacle. The second temple, of course, is a rectangular box, as is Noah's Ark, a rectangular box. So as far as a correlation in dimensions, I don't know that there is one necessarily. I've never spent any time thinking about it. Or the Ark of the Covenant, would be a more likely correlation because it's a rectangular box also. So, not sure.
Okay, well, that was really my big observation. So I'll just pop out of here and let you guys go at it. Thanks for letting me pop on.
All right, brother.
It's always good to see you, man.
Thank
Same
you.
here, John. And great talking to you guys always.
All right,
Likewise.
shalom.
All right. Anybody else out there?
I put the link in the chat room, but you got a lot of questions. And Patricia shot me another text, and I just want to clarify this, but it's not in the initial listing of the other sons. And she says, why does Rob think Nimrod is listed separately? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I do know what she's talking about. Let me go back to Genesis 10. It may be that, he's isolated there because he's a prominent figure, just like in Genesis 9, 18 and 19, where it says, these are the three sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Ham begot Canaan. It's like, well, why did it, he also had three other sons. So why did he just sing? And the other guys had children too. So why is Moses making a point of singling this one character out? So it may be along the same lines. Yeah, because if you go to, let me bring that up for everybody. The sons of Ham, Cush and Mizraim and Put and Canaan. And the sons of Cush, blah, 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 yada, yada, all these guys. I'm not going to try to pronounce their name. And all of a sudden, you got this standout. Boom. It could be that it's being isolated right there because when we turn to the next chapter, it's all about him, And so, and you also have a little bit more detail, all these other ones, okay, he just begot these people right here, but we see a little bit more elaboration that he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Although in the Septuagint it just says a giant, he's a giant hunter. And I've said it before, it could be one of several things. He was a hunter of giants. He was a giant himself, or he was just a mighty man. I think all three are true. I think he was a giant, mighty man who was also a hunter and subduer of other giants himself. So, yeah, I think that it makes sense to me that Moses could have singled him out right here, and just because he's going to add a little bit more detail, and the whole next chapter is about him.
Well, that answers that question. Okay, going to start from the top because you got there's a lot of questions going along with this Torah portion. Tiffany says, and I think you had one earlier in the week along these lines, did any of the Nephilim survive in the water itself through the flood?
Yeah, we talked about that last week. I mean, it would be speculation because there's nothing in the text that would indicate that. I don't see anything, certainly not in the biblical text. I mean, I haven't looked at every single other extra biblical text out there to see if anybody else said anything. Although there was a Jewish fable, and I write it off as a fable. Just about the same as Jack and the Beanstalk. There's a Jewish fable that Og of Bashan survived the flood by hanging on to the ark. That he was like literally hanging. He's this huge giant, kind of hanging onto the ark, and it's like he's on jet skis or something behind the boat. He's hanging on there for a year, and that Noah was feeding him, out the portal or whatever. I write that off as a Jewish fable. That doesn't really have any credibility to me, especially since when you consider the timeline from Noah all the way till the conquest of the land of Canaan with the Israelites coming in out of the Exodus, it's just too much time there. for him to have been a pre-flood giant to have lived all that time. I believe he would have outlived Methuselah, if I'm not mistaken, if that was the case. Or he would have certainly outlived. He would outlive. I'm trying to remember now. If I remember doing the timeline out, I think he would have outlived Methuselah. So anyway, I write that off. I don't buy it. So
did you watch that movie Jack and the Beanstalk? Did you go see that?
The recent one?
Yeah, the recent one.
No, I don't think I did.
Highly interesting, the way they portrayed the giants in that thing. I think you would find it interesting.
I did see one of them, and I can't remember which one it was. Maybe it was that. It wasn't called Jack and the Beanstalk, though. It was, I don't remember what it was called. I don't know.
I don't know.
It didn't make a lasting impression on me, whatever it was.
Well, we're waiting. Here he is. I put you on mute, Mr. Glass. If you can unmute and ask your question to Rob, that'd be great.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey.
Who am I speaking with here?
This is Jesse. How are you guys doing?
Jesse, good. How you doing?
Good to see you.
In verse Jesse.
Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So in Genesis 10, verse 11, it says, out of that land went forth Asher, and he built Nineveh. Now, I'm wondering, is this the same Nineveh that Nimrod built? And is Nimrod Asher?
Yeah, that comes up a lot. Some people make the case that Asher was a descendant of Japheth. If you look at the lineage of Japheth up here in verse 2, I don't see Asher. You got Ashkenaz, where some people talk about the Ashkenazi Jews, like from Spain, come from. Let me see if there's anything else here. I don't see anything else there. Or let me see if it's in Shem anywhere. Eber. Now you have Asher down here. The children of Shem, Elam and Asher, are Arphaxad and Lud and Aram. So yeah, I was mistaken. It's not Japheth, it's Shem apparently. Oh, I'm sitting here talking and not even showing you the screen here. Sorry about that. So let me go back up and out of that land. Okay, so you have Nimrod becomes a mighty hunter, and the beginning of his kingdom, that's important. Beginning of his kingdom, because he eventually took over everything, was Babel and Erech and Akkad and Calneh and the land of Shinar. Out of that land, this land of kingdom of Nimrod, went forth Asher and builded Nineveh and the city of Rehoboth and Calah. So I think you can make an interesting case that this Asher is the same as the one from Shem down here that we read about in verse 22. So, I mean, a lot of times the land is named after its original founder or discoverer or builder. But Nimrod ends up taking over all of it. So he basically becomes the ruler of Asher. In other words, he's the Assyrian. Assyrian is it comes from Asher. That the word Assyrian comes from the word Asher. So, I'm a Texan because I live in Texas, but I didn't found Texas. I'm coming forth out of Texas. I'm broadcasting here out of Texas, but as a Texan, but I'm not the founder of Texas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. I was wondering though, if you look in some other translations, like I'm reading the ESV right now, and the ESV seems to make it seem as if Nimrod is Asher, because it says the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. And from that land, he, being Nimrod, went into Assyria and built Nineveh and Rehoboth, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Is there like a I guess are people divided on that issue?
There are people who are divided on it. I'm pulling up you said it was ESV, right? English Standard Version.
Yeah.
So I pulled up the parallel Bible right here on BibleGateway.com, and you're right. I mean, it looks like two totally different things right here, because in King James it says, "And out of that land went forth Asher," and ESV says, "From that land he," going back to the antecedent being Nimrod, went into Assyria and built Nineveh. So good question, man. I'm sure there's been plenty of commentaries out there who've written on it. But there's something else that I noticed right here that I've noticed as a discrepancy in the King James. It's rather problematic. It's a little bit further down in verse 14. The children of Mitzrayim, it says, "And Pathrusim and Kazluhim, out of whom came the Philistines, and Caphtorim." That's incorrect. The Philistines did not come from Casluhim; they came from Caphtorim, and the King James itself tells you that in Jeremiah and Amos, I believe. So, but if you read this, you think Casluhim is the father of the Philistines, when the King James itself tells you no, the Philistines came from Caphtor. And you have the same problem in the ESV. It also says from whom the Philistines came, although there's a footnote. No, that doesn't work there. I think it's the NASB. Let me pull that one up. That gives you or the New Living Translation. I forget which. So all that to say, here we go. It could get confusing, and this is why I'm a huge advocate for parallel Bibles, because it helps you to, okay, here we go. Here's a perfect example. We see the Philistines coming from Casluhim in the King James as well as the ESV. The New Living says, "And the Caphtorites from whom the Philistines came," showing that the Philistines came from Caphtor. And here are the cross references for that. Jeremiah 47:4 and Amos 9:7 both tell you that the Philistines came from Caphtor, not Casluhim. So sorry, all you King James only people out there, but King James is in error here, and it looks like the ESV followed suit. So going back to your question, it's a similar situation, and I guess it would be in how you break the sentence down, and how I'm not a Hebrew scholar, so I can't see what it says in the original Hebrew there. But we see also in the New Living, from there he, being Nimrod, expanded his territory into Assyria.
Yeah, I see that too. And I was thinking, if that's true, if Asher is Nimrod, that's very interesting, because of all the times in the prophets, the Antichrist is referred to as Asher.
Yes, that's correct.
Or the Assyrian.
Yep. And I've talked about that quite a bit in my various other materials. I do believe it, like in Micah chapter 5, for instance, is a really good one. I believe it's talking about Nimrod, but again, he doesn't have to be Asher, although he could be. Nimrod, the word Nimrod means "we shall rebel," and the way it's listed in the genealogy in the table of nations in Genesis 10, it appears that that's what he was named. That he was named Nimrod, but he has other titles, like in Genesis 14, he's Amraphel.
Yeah.
And of course, many other cultures have various names for him as well. So, that's why I call him the man of many names, because he definitely does have many names.
Yeah, and I'm actually looking at the Hebrew right now, and it does say Asher, so it doesn't. It's very specific about that name.
Well, the name's there, but it's the way that the sentence is written that is confusing, because like in King James, "out of that land went forth Asher." Where other translations, well, let me use the Bible.cc is a good one, because it'll give us the parallel. So it's Genesis 10, 11. So Genesis 10, this is why I love this tool, because it gives me all the translations right here, or not all of them, but a whole bunch of them anyway. So let's see. NIV says he went into Asher. New Living, he expanded it into Asher. ESV, he went into Asher.
Yeah.
So the majority of these texts are saying, it looks like nearly all of them say that he went forth into Asher.
So interesting.
King James makes you think that he is Asher.
Because in Hebrew, it literally says from that land went out Asher. So, in the Hebrew, min haaretz hahi yatsa Asher.
Out of land that went forth Asher. Yeah. Yeah, good point. Frankly, I could go either way with it because I see just as much value in the analogy of, hey, I'm a Texan, though I'm not the founder of Texas, coming forth from a land called Texas, which would still make him, in this case, an Assyrian either way.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting, so I wanted to get your take on it. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know if I really answered anything, but it's...
Well, I was just curious because I saw that before, and I'm like, this is crazy. Like, could it be? So
You're not the only one, Jesse, because a lot of people in the chat room right now are discussing just this. Trying to figure out, is Nimrod becoming Antichrist? Is he or isn't he?
Well, of that I am absolutely certain of. Let me just say my strong and what I consider to be well-informed opinion is that he is, and that one of his titles throughout the Old Testament is the Assyrian. So is that because his name is Asher, or because he just conquered and went forth from the land of Asher? I could go either way on that.
Any more thoughts, Jess, that you wanna bring up and ask Rob why you got him?
No, that's it.
Good.
Thank you, Rob.
Hey, do you speak Hebrew?
I can read Hebrew and I can speak it horribly.
Right,
So,
right on. How long have you been studying?
about 3 years. So
3 years. Good for you.
yeah, it's awesome.
Cool. Yeah, for sure. I took Hebrew 101 twice, so that gives you the indication of my aptitude for learning other languages.
And I've got to go ask my 16-year-old son, so I'm in the same boat.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for coming on, and I hope to see you back next week if you have any more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, man.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
All right, Jeff. And hope to see you back next week. Hello, Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff's got a delay.
Yeah. Are you there, Jeff? All right, Jeff. Let me see if I can help that out. Hello, Jeff.
Praise the Lord. Hi, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Sorry about that.
There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, are we in real time here?
I'm sorry. I have my speaker muted. I'm sorry. Never did this before.
Welcome aboard, Jeff. It's good to see you.
Oh, praise the Lord. Good to see you guys both. Thank you. Hey, before I ask my question, I really have to say this because Rob brought me into Torah by the flat earth. I honestly was, I'm a nerd's nerd. I like to look at things outside the box. And honestly, I told everybody about the 70 names of the Antichrist and the Archon invasion. He went on this flat earth gig. Honestly, I thought he lost his mind. And I was so distressed and perplexed. And I was like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? I was one of those guys yelling at you, but a friend of mine in flat earth, he talked to me about it. Then the Holy Spirit, of course, did his job. And so I'm in Torah because of Rob Skiba. And I just really wanted to thank you and apologize to you for, not giving you the benefit of the doubt, thinking you were off your rocker there. But I love you, brother. I really do. Thank you so much. I wanted to do that.
Praise Yahweh.
Wow, thank you. I still may be off my rocker, but thank you for the testimony anyway. That's awesome.
I had a question about the whole Nimrod thing. I really got into the Nephilim like a couple of years ago. Right around the same time I was shedding the whole Christmas and Easter thing. The Lord kind of did me backwards with the whole pagan holiday stuff before I even got into Torah, But I know there's some book out there, and it's not one of those, messed up books. It's like Jasher or Enoch or Jubilees or whatever, where it says that Semiramis made Nimrod Nephilim or Gabor. So here's my question. If the demons came from the bodies of the Nephilim, then where did the spirits come that inhabited them in the first place? And I guess the follow-up would be, because I know a lot of people have like a reincarnation problem when it comes to Nimrod and the Antichrist. When he became a Gabor or a Nephilim through the ritual, that was probably pre-flood, does that mean that his soul was damned at that point? He was dragged down to Sheol, and that he was inhabited by a demon fully, or his soul became a demon? You see what it's like, the two-parter thing there? I just wanted to get your 2 cents on that. Maybe that demon will be the thing that inhabits the future Antichrist. So that way you got no reincarnation stuff going on.
Yeah, I've never believed in the reincarnation side of it anyway, but it is a very interesting question, because if you look at some of the names that are associated with him, we talked about Gilgamesh last year, well, probably did last year too, but last week. And Gilgamesh is said to have been 1/3 man and 2/3 God.
Right.
So how does that work? Well, genetically, you just have to kind of figure out how, if you've got an entity that would be considered an Elohim, an angel or whatnot, how does that break down to 2/3? That's the part you'd have to kind of figure out genetically. I'm not smart enough to I can kind of wrap my head around it, but, I'm not a geneticist, so I don't know how 2/3, genetically would work like that. But what I do find interesting is that Semiramis / Ishtar, Isis, all the various names that she's known by, and if she is Ishtar also, she's pre-flood, at least according to the Sumerian text, because she left the earth in the Sumerian text to avoid the flood weapon that was going to wipe out the world. So if she did manage to float above the earth during the time of the flood and came back down, as the Sumerian texts indicate, then she's already whatever percentage. I don't believe she would have been an original angel-human hybrid, because they were wiped out 500 years after the initial incursion, which was 700 years before the flood. However, she could have been a later generation Titan, or an Olympian class, or a demigod class, if we were to use the Greek terminology. Whatever the case may be, she's clearly got that kind of genetics in her. And then and she is the she is the mother of Nimrod. She is his sister, or half sister. I forget how it works. She's half sister / mother / wife. So it's really kind of jacked up the way, when you look through the various mythologies of how her relationship is to him. So how she could be his half sister would be confusing to me. Now, I've read it in the text, but I don't know how that would work. If she's also his mother from before the flood, she would have to have done something. There'd have to be another person in the picture for her to be his half sister, if that makes sense. Whatever the case may be, she's clearly messed up genetically. And if it's true that she is the mother / half sister / wife of Nimrod, then maybe that's how the 2/3 issue got there. Where does the spirit come from? Well, when the angel mates with a human, I don't believe that there's a God prescribed nefesh that would happen there. We know that God is spirit, right? We read this in Scripture that God is spirit. Well, the angels are also spirit. So the original spirit of God breathed into Adam, and he became a living nefesh, a living soul. His spirit came from Yahuwah. So when the angels came and mated with women, perhaps something of their nefesh, if you will, entered into the woman, and you've got this abomination. Because that spirit has nowhere to go. After you kill the Nephilim that was never meant to exist in the first place, it can't go to heaven, and what else are you going to do with it? So it becomes a wandering, evil, unclean spirit, according to Enoch chapter 15. Now, in Jubilees, says that after the flood, all of those previously living Nephilim that got all wiped out and killed and everything, all those demons were just assaulting Noah and his family after the flood. And so Noah complains, like, hey, help. We were getting assaulted here. And so Yahuwah was going to say, basically, I'm going to put them all in Tartarus, with their parents. And then Mastema shows up, and I believe Mastema is one of the names for Satan, or the devil, says, hey, can I have 10%? Put the other ones away if you want to, but let me have 10%. And for whatever reason, in his sovereignty, according to the text, Yahuwah says, okay, I'll give you 10%. So thankfully, that's the case, because if there was as many people on the earth as there are today at the time of the flood, we'd have 7.5 billion plus demons out there assaulting us. But thankfully, we only got 10% of that. But they were aware of the judgment of their brothers and sisters, because when Yeshua showed up, they freaked out. Because they knew where their destiny is, but they were spared the original judgment from where the other 90% went. And they said, have you come to torment us before the time? They know that they have an established time, and it hasn't come yet. So, and they knew who he was, which means they had some reckoning of whatever the judgment was initially when they saw that 90% of their brothers and sisters go into the pit. And they said, whoa, hey, we don't want to go yet, put us in the pigs or whatever. So what spirit did Nimrod have? Well, I mean, we'd be speculating at this point. We know that Cush is his father, according to the biblical narrative. So if Cush is his father, then I believe he has a normal nefesh, if you will, albeit perhaps corrupted somehow, depending on who his mother is. But when he died, the big question is, okay, where did his spirit go? Did he become a wandering spirit? Is that the spirit of Antichrist that's even out and about today? Or did it go into the bottomless pit? And I've heard compelling arguments for both. I tend to think it's in the bottomless pit because we see the beast comes from the bottomless pit. That's what it says in Revelation 17. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'd all be speculating at this point, as best we can looking at the text. I don't believe that we're going to deal with the scenario where an earthly president of the United States is going to get shot in the head and then be possessed by the spirit of Nimrod. I don't think that's the way it's going to work. I believe that if he's a direct antithesis of Yeshua, he's an antichrist, an antithesis of Christ, then, Christ arose in his own body. The body that he had that was killed, he came back into. So I tend to believe that the body that Nimrod had that was killed, the spirit's going to go back into it. And that may be the significance of finding the body of Gilgamesh in 2003 in April, and the fact that the United States initially immediately set up the military occupation phase the following month and built 500 military bases and the largest embassy in the world, staffed it with 50,000 people a month later. So is the spirit of Antichrist going to go right back into that carcass? Matthew 24, he says, where the carcass is, there the eagles shall be gathered together. Maybe, could be. Or from what I understand, because Steve Quayle has connections with some Army general or whatever, some military people who were part of that mission, said that the body was extremely well preserved. So, I mean, if you just saw the last X-Men movie, that's what it was all about, man. The last X-Men movie, Apocalypse, was all about this. I mean, it was like play by play. It's like they were reading my book and Tom Horn and Steve Quayle's books and stuff, and just plagiarized it and made a movie out of it. Is that the way it's going to happen? Maybe. I don't know. Or could it be that they take genetic material from that well-preserved carcass and then clone a fresh body that would still be the same body? I mean, it's just kind of rejuvenated DNA that the spirit can go into. Again, we'd all be speculating.
Well, you've just answered maybe 5 or 6 questions that came out of the chat room with that one answer. But getting into the DNA part, because I think you make one of the most compelling arguments for what they did over in the Middle East during this, I guess, I don't know what to call this, the wars that we've been having over there. But the DNA part, can you elaborate a little bit more on how you think that's going to play out?
Well, I mean, no, not really. I'm not a geneticist, so I don't know how that works. If the body itself is well preserved, then all it needs is a nefesh to go back into it. It just needs the breath of life to come back into it, the spirit. But if that body is degraded to the point where it's not as well preserved as it would need to be, then we've got plenty of examples of cloning to understand. I mean, Dolly the sheep and other things like that. And if Freeman Fly is correct, he makes I'll just say I'm not totally on board. I'm not saying I totally believe it, but I will say he makes an extremely compelling and very interesting case for the idea that Obama may be a cloned Akhenaten, and in fact his whole family looks like the royal family of Akhenaten. So have we? I mean, anything that we're being told in the news today, as far as the advancements of science, we are in reality at least 20 years beyond that. So if we have the ability right now to clone a human being from the tissue of a formerly living human being, then if that's what they're telling us, then you got to know that we're at least two to 3 decades beyond that ability. And if that's the case, or even more than that, 40, 50 years beyond that, what were they doing in the 1920s with the eugenics? Eugenics really started to pick up like big time. If people want to just do some really interesting research on this, do some research on eugenics in the United States prior to World War II. The Nazis learned a lot. They just copied us, basically. We started it, the whole eugenics thing. So if you could just go back and study eugenics in the 1920s and then extrapolate that forward to here we are, almost pushing the 2020s, 100 years later, what could have been possible? And if a lot was possible, then maybe it is reasonable that the current family in the White House could be clones. I don't know, but if you go check out Freeman Fly's material, he makes an extremely compelling case.
Well, he did while he was on your show. I know that's what turned us on to listening to him. I mean, a lot of his work in cloning, he says we've been doing it way before. I mean, earlier into the 20s and before, he seems to think. So, I mean, he makes a good case.
Well, the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, it was a very visionary story. But, from what I understand, and I sat in a lecture that Tom Horn did at one of the big prophecy conferences, and he was kind of giving the history. He and I think somebody else was talking about it, of Mary Shelley and her connections and the people that she was able to hang out with and socialize with and get information from in order to write her fictionalized story. I mean, it's the Nimrod story. You got a beast of a human that's all hacked up, and they use electricity or whatever to bring it back to life. Well, Nimrod, if he is Osiris, was hacked up into 14 pieces, 13 of which were found, and he put back together again. Interesting, he's missing one piece, and it says that he won't have desire for women. Well, okay, that might explain that.
It's all through the genres too, music, video games, TV shows. It's everywhere if you know where to look and what to listen for. And that's that. And it's almost, I guess, it's in their code. They have to tell you before they do it.
Yeah.
But it's in everything. The TV shows, Supernatural. I mean, you got Lucifer, for crying out loud, now a TV show, and
Right.
of course they're feeling bad for him because he's so misunderstood and all this stuff.
Right.
It's just crazy. Hey, Rob, one last question for you, then I'll, I don't want to hog everybody's time, but do you happen to remember the book or chapter where it dealt with the fact that they invoked the name of God to make the first generation Nephilim? Have you ever heard anything like that?
No, not that they invoked it to create Nephilim. However, people who believe in the Sethite theory, that the sons of God were the good sons of Seth and the daughters of men are the bad daughters of Cain. Well, I mean, you look at what is it? I think it's Genesis 3 or 4, where it says, "In the days of Enosh, men began to call upon the name of the Lord." Again, terrible translation. No, the word "began" means to defile. And if you look at many Jewish commentaries, ancient rabbinical commentaries, and people who study the Torah for their life, show that what that text is really saying is that they began to profane the name of God. They began to sin. They began to create idols. So that appears to be a precursor that maybe opened up some gateways and whatnot in the spirit realm to allow Genesis 6 to take place, because there was actually, as a result of that, a pre-flood flood. We know of the flood of Noah, but Joshua tells you, because of the profaning that took place in the days of Enosh, that God caused a localized flood. He caused the Gihon River to flood 1/3 of the land, and 1/3 of the earth. So, yeah, man, I mean, there's a pre-flood flood, and it's because the sons of Shem were not godly people. They were, some of them were, certainly some of them were, but things started going wrong pretty quick.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks very much for letting me on and asking the questions. Rob, I really do appreciate and thank you so much, brother. I really, really do.
Thanks for
you.
coming on. Thanks for coming on, Jeff.
Yeah.
Really good questions there.
Yeah, really good. I'm trying to see where. Let me pull this up here so people know what I'm talking about. This is chapter 5. So this is where we get the lineage. Enos, Seth lived after he begot Enos, and Enoch. Am I missing it here? Somewhere it says that it was in his days that men began to call upon the name of the Lord. Why am I not seeing it? Well, this search engine is not that great, but let me see. And to call. Oh, here we go. I must have looked right at it and just didn't see it. Verse 26. And to Seth, to him was born a son. He called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. Terrible translation. Then men began to profane the name of the Lord. And they began to create idols and worship them. That's what was going on here.
One of the questions in the chat room, somebody asked if Nimrod was serving Yahweh Elohim before his demise.
I think, and it's been a while since I've read it, that I think Joshua seems to indicate that might have been the case. And if that's true, again, it's been a long time since I read that, so I could be wrong. But if that's true, it would serve all the more to illustrate what I've been saying, that when you start corrupting the image by blending yourself, that you end up with only evil continually in your heart and mind. That's a byproduct of doing that. So when it says that he began to be or began to become, and the word began in that text right there is profane, and it has like sexual connotation to it. It's the same words used for prostitution, elsewhere. That he would have, his personality would have changed, just like the doctor in the Spider-Man movie, where he was a good normal guy, missing his arm, and he lost it in combat, and he blends himself with lizard DNA so he could grow his arm back, and then all of a sudden he becomes this evil, being that's just has only evil continually in his heart and mind. I think that movie perfectly illustrates it.
Do you think it changes the nefesh?
I do. I think it either causes the Spirit of God to evacuate, as Genesis 6:3 talks about, where it says, "My spirit will no longer dwell with you," for because it says, "For he is flesh." Well, we've been flesh since we were created, So I mean, if you just read it like that, it doesn't really make any sense. But if that flesh has become corrupted, and we know that he created us in the image and likeness of himself, to be a house for his spirit. So, he's a like kind, if you will. He created us in his likeness so his spirit can dwell within us. But when we corrupt it and jack it all up, we're messing up his house. And he says, look, I'm not going to hang out with you anymore. So if his spirit, if his nefesh evacuates, what fills the void? And, a demon would be the most likely candidate. And that's why I think you have only evil continually.
Excellent. There's a question along the lines of corruption. This comes from Marcel. It talks about how all flesh had become corrupt. He's assuming that this means animals too. Were all the animals corrupt except for those that went on the ark? Have you ever pondered that one?
I spent a lot of time pondering that one. And it's made me wonder, all means all, right? All flesh has been corrupted. We see that the human flesh has been corrupted. And, we know that Noah and his wife and his 3 sons are pure, because the text tells you that Noah is pure, right? And his wife, he took his wife as a daughter of Enoch. So really good indication that she's pure. Well, if Noah and his wife are pure, then it stands to reason that the 3 sons would be pure. But we don't get any mention of the wives until verse 17, which is after 12, after all flesh has become corrupted. And Joshua tells you that he didn't even pick the wives until 7 days before the flood, the same day Methuselah died. So you had a wedding and a funeral the same day. Well, you'll notice that none of their brothers made it on the ark. None of their parents made it on the ark. So, something's up.
Well, in verse 20 of chapter 6, it says, of the birds after their kind, and of the cattle after their kind.
It does over and over and over again. It says after their kind.
Yes.
With the exception of the humans. It just says they.
Right.
So everything seems to still be after their kind. But my question would be, my question would be, at what point is the corruption so great that the spirit that God put in it has to evacuate? Because we can make a good case that our flesh is thoroughly corrupted right now because we grew up eating Twinkies and Fruit Loops, cereal, and thinking that was good for us, and our skies being sprayed with chemtrails all the time, and our food is all jacked up, and our water's poison, and we're breathing pollution all the time. So and everybody's dying of cancer and stuff. So there's a really good case to be made that our flesh is corrupt right now. But I don't believe we've reached the stage where we're corrupted beyond being redeemable. We still have the capacity to repent. We still have the capacity to be saved. We don't have only evil continually, although there are a lot of bad people out there doing bad things. We haven't reached that stage of physical corruption yet. So my take on it is that the animals that entered the ark are still of the right kind, just as the people were. They're still of kind, the right kind. He tells them to be fruitful and multiply, so they had the ability to procreate. My thesis says that if you use a Punnett square, you end up with a 50-50 chance of having 100% normal offspring even if the female is corrupted, as long as the male is pure. If the male is pure, and Shem, Ham, and Japheth were, then even if the female is a 50-50 corrupted hybrid, you've still got a 50-50 chance of 100% normal children. And once you produce a 100% normal female and 100% normal males, then everything goes off normally, But if you happen to hit the lot where you don't get 100% pure, well, you've got to weed some of that stuff out, through procreation later on, basically. But with the animals, I don't know, because I've wondered, was everything that is poisonous today to us, snake venom and different things that cause harm to us, was it that way before the flood? I tend to think no. I don't believe that some of the things that are poisonous today were poisonous then. That things changed as a result, and other things too. I kind of question like things like scabies and mites and things like that. Were
Right.
those early attempts at genetic engineering to perpetuate problems, viruses and pestilence and things like that. Because I don't know enough about these creatures to know what other function that they serve in the ecosystem. And I would never make the assumption, say, oh, we don't need that anymore. Whenever mankind has said we don't need this anymore, and they get rid of a certain insect or whatever, well, it causes a repercussion because there are other animals that live off of that insect or plants that are dependent on that. And there's a lot of symbiotic relationships that get messed up when we think, oh, we don't need that. So I wouldn't presume to say we don't need those things, but I don't know of any benefit to them, and they're like a real nuisance to get rid of. I mean, if you just do a Google search on somebody who had to deal with scabies, you'll see people have dealt with it for years trying to get rid of that stuff. I mean, all kinds of, even natural remedies and chemicals and pharmaceuticals, and, they're very persistent in various viruses and, things like that. And, mosquitoes. And, I think, if a mosquito was a genetically engineered creature, what a perfect way for the enemy to create a mobile flesh corruptor, just going around inserting bad DNA into stuff. We talk about Zika virus and all these different things or whatever. Being it's like every year we got a scare because of some kind of mosquito, West Nile virus or whatever. were those things originally created by God? I don't know. Were they originally created by the fallen ones, Nephilim, to continue to perpetuate the corruption of all flesh? I don't know. But I do question whether the animals that came through the ark, even though they are still of the right kind, it says, after their kind, after their kind, after their kind, were they still in some way corrupted? Were they still in some way modified to fit under the criteria of all flesh being corrupted and changed in some way?
See, that's how I read it, because Noah was Tamim, and
Correct.
I mean, he was perfect in his generation. His wife, of course, you've taught that he married Enoch's daughter, and then the sons, okay, because that's a good line right there. That's a pure genetic line. And we look at that family, except for the wives, okay, except for the wives. But you look at the animals, out of all the animal kingdoms, each animal of its kind, these were the Tamim. I mean, I've always tried to think of it that way. And yet I see where it says in verse, let's see, after their kind, as you, okay, and they come to him. It's almost like Yahweh brings them to him.
Yeah.
Like he handpicks them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it could be that, okay, let's say all dogs have been corrupted. Well, maybe a better example would be wolf, because I think pretty much all the dogs that we have today are basically the result of human breeding from an original wolf-like creature. All right. So let's say all wolves were corrupted. Well, if Yahuwah is the one that brought 2 by 2 or in pairs of 7 or whatever to Noah, then he would have likely weeded through all of it and found the best candidate to perpetuate the line. So that we could be assured that the wolf kind enters the ark, and it's good enough to procreate and maybe weed out whatever bad genetics might have been there originally, over time or whatnot. Maybe some some genetics became dormant, or recessive genes and things of that nature. I don't know, but I mean, if you just think, I think there's 350 species or varieties of dog, and you got everything from like a Chihuahua to Great Danes, all originally coming from like a wolf. I mean, if you just look at all the variety of dogs there are, and vastly different sizes and shapes and colors and whatnot, and if that's the result of human intervention, we were able to do that from essentially a wolf. Well, that shows the diversity of, and they can reproduce within their own kind. I mean, kind of awkward for a Chihuahua and a Great Dane to get together. That'd be a pretty disturbing image, but technically, I suppose it's possible. I mean, because they are of the same kind, So, I mean, we're speculating at this point. I mean, I don't think anybody in the audience, well, maybe there's some geneticists out there. If they are, you can pipe in and educate us. But the rest of us, I think, are shooting in the dark, trying to figure it out.
Wow. I think, where was it? I got that image in my head.
A Chihuahua and a Great Dane stuck on his head.
Stop. Okay.
Get the fire hose.
Okay, that was bad.
Sorry.
That's great stuff. It just comes to your head.
Ooh, here we go.
Okay.
We better go to the next question before this spirals out of control too quickly.
Kosher. We're going to go kosher because you mentioned GMO earlier and biblically eaten. And it's a good question because we see the clean and unclean going on to the ark. What is your thoughts on being kosher?
Well, I think Steve Mucha said it best in the show I did with him Wednesday night. Kosher is not a biblical, it's rabbinic. I mean, because when we think kosher today, basically it's a rabbi can, dominus ominous, whatever, blah blah blah. It's good to go. Goyim, go ahead and eat the pork. I blessed it. It's kosher for the goyim. But I understand what you're saying. When we use the term kosher, we're talking about biblically clean foods. So what was your question specifically to the kosher issue or the biblically clean issue?
Well, the question was towards you because we, as an audience, have heard you talk about eating biblically clean.
Right.
you follow that line. But what do you think about the GMOs? You talked about Fruit Loops and all this stuff that we thought were healthy for us, and how far do we take it as far as in our personal? How would you advise somebody?
I mean, the reason behind the dietary laws is because Yahuwah knows how he made our body. He knows what's good for this body to take in for its ultimate benefit. And he knows how he created the animals and the plants and different things. He knows how, what is good and what is not good for us to consume. So, basically what's amazing to me is that even secular scientists who have no dog in this hunt, who have no interest in Torah or the Bible in general, confirm that the same foods that the Bible calls unclean are actually bad for us. So, for me, all you have to do is get sick, really sick once, and you realize, man, I don't like being sick. Last year, I'm rarely sick. I don't remember the last time I was sick, apart from that 5 days last year where I got knocked on my butt, man. I was messed up. It was like I had like this constant cough. I couldn't stop. Like my want to talk about ab workout? Holy cow, man! I felt like I did like a million crunches, and just coughing constantly. You can't sleep, and you're sneezing, you're coughing, and your throat is raw, and your stomach hurts, and you can't clear your throat, and you just go through a few days of that and say, man, this stinks. I don't like being sick. Well, between that and other things like I got that shaky thing that bothers my hands every now and then and whatnot. You say to yourself, okay, geez, I'm 47 years old. If I don't do something about this now, I'm going to be in rough shape by the time I'm 60. So for me, I'm like, okay, well, God made a way for me to eat healthy, and he gave us plenty of examples in scripture. I mean, you look at what happened with Daniel and the Hebrews, slaves there that said, you know what, we're going to do it God's way, and wow, they were healthier and stronger than all the other people in the kingdom, right? Well, there's an example of foods that will make you healthier and stronger. So why wouldn't you eat them? The problem is because we grew up on corn syrup and sugar, we're addicted to it. That's just the bottom line. Is we're addicted to it. And my sister and brother-in-law were just down here, with the funeral and everything, and they had both put on a fair amount of weight over the years, and looked in the mirror and said, you know what, we got to do something about this. And they just made a change in their diet, basically cutting out carbs or cutting them down significantly. And man, they look great. I mean, my brother-in-law, he looks just like Bruce Willis. I mean, if you ever seen a picture of him, in fact, they went to a bar one time, and this person comes up to him, and because he lived in Boise, Idaho, near where Bruce and Demi lived when they were together, and people would come up to him all the time and ask for his autograph. And he's like, yeah, sure, man. So he'd write down Thomas Kinman, and give him, he'd write down his name, and they'd go back from Thomas Kinman, who's that, He looks just like Bruce Willis, but he also looks like, when he had gained weight, what's the actor's name that played the Shield? He's also in the show Gotham, Childress or something like that. I can't think of his name. Anyway, another bald actor, but he's heavier. If you see my brother-in-law's before and after pictures, he looks just like that actor when he was heavy, and looks like Bruce Willis when he's thin. Well, I mean, he's back to, practically washboard abs, of the 20, when he's my age, in his 40s, looks like when he's in his 20s. And all he did was just simply cut out junk food. He's like, I haven't been going to the gym. I haven't run. I don't do any cardio or anything. This is just changing my diet. This is what I got, in a fairly short amount of time. So why wouldn't we try to live healthy, especially when Yahuwah gave us the directions on how to do so? But we have to overcome our own addictions in order to do that, some people, you'd swear you were asking them to give up their God when you say, pork is bad for you. You probably shouldn't eat bacon anymore. And, it's an idol when they go completely psycho on you and, well, I don't have to hear it. Don't preach to me. And you're getting legalistic and blah, blah, blah. Like, well, dude, man, it's bad for you. And if you want to just, we read the biblical narrative and we're like, well, okay, I'm not going to eat anymore. I like bacon and sausage just like anybody else, but I read it, I said, well, okay, I'm not. And then I saw the excellent video done by, what's his name? He's Walter Veith. He did
Walter
this.
Veith.
Yeah, he did this excellent video on eating clean and unclean, but he does so both from a biblical perspective as well as from a scientific perspective. He's a scientist, so he shows what's the deal with the animals that have hooves or cloven feet, and chew the cud, and how their stomachs are and how they process food. He shows scientifically why it's good for you or why it's bad for you. So, I mean, that was all extremely convincing for me, but the game changer was when some of us from our Torah group had heard something, and we thought, well, let's do a little experiment, and we cooked a ham, got a ham from the supermarket, cooked it, like thoroughly cooked it as if we were about to serve it for dinner to eat it, and then poured Coke on it, which should tell you a little bit about Coke also, and saw the worms come crawling out of the meat. And we're like, okay, I'm done with Coke and I'm done with ham, period. All done. I mean, once you see that, yeah, you're not going to eat it anymore. But all that to say, Yahuwah knows how he made us, and he gave us guidelines on how to eat properly. So why wouldn't we want to do so, other than our own addictions?
Along those lines, and this comes right out of the Torah Portions, this comes from Jeff. He's asking about Genesis 9:3-4. And he's asking, do you think at the time everything was okay to eat and then God changed the dietary laws? How would you explain this?
Let's see. Let me push it up here. I still have the parallel Bible up so we can look at it. King James, ESV, and New Living. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb have I given you all things. But the flesh of the life with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, you shall not eat. So we know we're not supposed to do blood. Okay. ESV, every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. And in New Living, I have given them to you for food, just as I have given you grain and vegetables. Now, I've heard people argue that that's not really what's being said there, and I can't back it up myself. So I'm not going to try to make that argument. I think it may be more reasonable if this text is in fact being correctly interpreted in English, then perhaps before the flood, things were okay. After the flood, things started getting bad for you. I still have a problem with that idea because of the fact that Noah specifically brought clean and unclean onto the ark. Clean by sevens and unclean just one pair. So, it seems to me that there was an understanding of what's good and what's bad before the flood, because otherwise you wouldn't have the differentiation between clean and unclean. So maybe when we look at that, it's saying all the clean is good for you, to eat. In other words, if I said everything in my refrigerator is yours to eat, John, have at it. Well, I'm not going to expect you to go start gnawing on the plastic containers. Even though I said, hey, everything in the refrigerator is yours, you can have it. It's understood that you're not going to eat that which is not considered food.
Right.
Well, the unclean animals were not considered food. I mean, that'd be like saying eating plastic.
That's a good enough analogy. It really is, because it's understood. Because earlier in the chapter, he tells you what's clean and what's not clean.
It is understood.
As it's going on to the ark.
Yeah. When it's saying every moving thing, I would liken that to say the same thing I said about the refrigerator. Because they understood that, well, I brought 7 pairs of a specific type of animal, and some say it's 7 pairs and that's 14, or it was 7 animals. Either way, you've got a lot more than just 2, one of each, male and female. So there's obviously a differentiation between what is good and what is not, as far as considered clean to eat.
I'm looking through the chat room questions, and man, you have answered almost all of them just by, you know, talking about the different subjects. But there's 2 or 3 of them in there I want to get in before we go into Joshua. Do we have time?
Yeah, let's cap it at 3. I'll try to keep my answers shorter, and we'll try to jump into Joshua.
Okay, this one. Let's see. Ruben asked, was Egypt one of the languages during the time of Moses? Just curious because it would explain the technology of the magicians being able to do miracles God was doing up to a certain point.
Was Egypt, you mean, was Hebrew?
Or, well, it says, was Egypt one of the languages during Moses?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, Egyptian was certainly a language, you know, at the time of Moses, because that's long after Nimrod.
Right. Have you, on Genesis chapter 10, verse 7, it's a genealogy of Cush. Have you ever done a name meaning list on those names?
Yeah, I did. Actually, Genesis 10, 6 through 20. Let me see if I can pull something up that would tell you that. It's in my book, but I think I have a digital copy of my book here. Let me look up on my backup drive. So I did a breakdown of 6 through 20. Oh, I'll tell you, it's in one of my PowerPoint presentations. I can find that for sure. Just give me a second here. PowerPoints. Images. Okay, Archon invasion. Let's try Archon invasion Evansville. Maybe.
Boy, I was
yeah. Well, that's why you might recognize it. Okay. Yep. Okay. Let me do a screen share here. So this is the breakdown of the names in Genesis 10, 6 through 20. Let me enlarge that there. So, and this is the same order. So Cush, his name means black. It also has a connotation of terror. And incidentally, I believe, and I know this is going to get a lot of people riled up, but this is my opinion. I believe Cush is the first black man. Now, other people dispute that. They say everybody was black, except for the, Goyim later, apparently Japheth's children. But, the first indication of somebody being black is Cush. And we have the Cushite is the Ethiopians. The Ethiopians were known as the Cushites, black. And Dr. Ken Johnson made what I thought was a very compelling case for how that could have happened, is that in the, and people can just look this up for themselves, in the equatorial regions of the earth, God put plants, specific types of plants in those regions that actually increase the body's ability to produce melanin. By eating it, it increases your melanin. Well, that just makes sense because melanin is produced so as to protect you against the harmful radiation of the sun when you're directly under the hot sun of the equatorial regions. So he, in his sovereign wisdom and understanding of how he made everything, put food there for people to eat who happen to live in that area so that their body, you put a, pink-skinned guy like me out there with all my Scottish heritage, and I'm going to have a problem. I've got to work my way slowly into that environment and build up a pretty decent base, or I come out like a red lobster and just totally, burnt up. So, and he pointed to, and I wish I could find the source for it. It was quite a while ago, a source that showed it was an Egyptian painting, like drawings, from a pyramid or something. I don't know where it was, in a temple or whatever. But it showed lighter skinned Egyptians around a pregnant woman, and they're feeding her something in a bowl, some kind of looks like some kind of vegetable or fruit. And then you see her with a black child. So she's a lighter colored person eating certain things, pregnant, and then when the child's born dark. Well, I think that's what may have happened with Cush, because we know that Ham settled, well, he settled kind of all over the place, but predominantly in the equatorial regions and down into Africa. So it makes sense to me then that Cush may have been one of the first to, be the darker skin because of the melanin. So anyway, there's Cush right there, and these are the sons of Ham right here, Cush, Mitzrayim, and Canaan, and then you get down to the various, these are some of the descendants of Cush right here, because you got Nimrod right there. So you just follow the same order of the names given to you in Genesis 10, 6 through 20. Those are the meanings. And when you string them together in a paragraph, in the order that we're given there, you end up with, he raged, a black terror, double straight afflicted trafficker, black terror, drink thou anguish, compass the chamber, thunder compass the smiting, he who is coming, their love, we shall rebel. That's Nimrod right there, the last, we shall rebel. A double straight firebrand, double straight, that's Mitzrayim. A firebrand, travailing, affliction of water, blades opening the moistened morsel, forgiven ones bowing to spy. A trafficker, that's Canaan. Hunting terrors, trodden downsayers, the strangers draw near. Showers of life, gnawing like thorns, they shall break loose. Double woolen enclosures of wrath. That's some pretty jacked up names right there. Yeah, again, that's just all the Hebrew names and their corresponding English meanings of the name, and we talked about that in last week's broadcast. And that's also covered, quite a bit in the notes from this week's Torah portion on the Virtual House Church. You scroll down, you got, of course, the Joshua reference there, and you have the names of the first 10 patriarchs from Adam to Noah. Some charts there. This is when I was still very much on the spinning heliocentric ball model. So there's some notes there from that model.
That was your Doberman Chihuahua mix.
Or something like that. Yeah. So so anyway, all that's covered. And, for people more interested in, here's videos for you to watch from my Archon Invasion series there. And of course, my book and DVDs and stuff you can check out. And here's the book that I used to translate the names. That's a great book. It cost me about $5 when I bought it. Highly recommend it. It's a dictionary of scripture proper names by J.B. Jackson. Must-have book.
Yeah, I've got it up there somewhere. The last question I'm going to answer, it looks like he's got 8 windows open, guys. 8.
Oh, that's nothing. That's on one screen.
Okay. Well,
I got two screens going. I typically will have anywhere from 20 to 25 or 30 screens open almost all the time.
That was the last of the questions, and
all
we
right.
can move into Joshua, because that's the next 2 chapters, 3 and 4, are just packed as well.
All right, let's jump in. We'll go to Bible.is and do the same thing we did last week. Here we go.
Joshua 3. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Shittim. And they came to the Jordan, he and all the people of Israel, and lodged there before they passed over. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people,
"As soon as you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. Yet there shall be a distance between you and it, about 2,000 cubits in length. Do not come near it, in order that you may know the way you shall go, for you have not passed this way before."
Then Joshua said to the people,
"Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you."
And Joshua said to the priests,
"Take up the ark of the covenant and pass on before the people."
So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. The Lord said to Joshua,
"Today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And as for you, command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, when you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan."
And Joshua said to the people of Israel,
"Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God."
And Joshua said,
"Here is how you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing over before you into the Jordan. Now, therefore, take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, from each tribe a man. And when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap.
So when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the brink of the water, now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest. The waters coming down from above stood and rose up in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan, and those flowing down toward the sea of the Arabah, the Salt Sea, were completely cut off, and the people passed over opposite Jericho. Now the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. Joshua 4. When all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua,
Take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, Take 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight.
Then Joshua called the 12 men from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, a man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them,
Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, What do those stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever.
And the people of Israel did just as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, just as the Lord told Joshua. And they carried them over with them to the place where they lodged, and laid them down there. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the covenant had stood. And they are there to this day. For the priests bearing the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished that the Lord commanded Joshua to tell the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. The people passed over in haste, and when all the people had finished passing over, the ark of the Lord and the priests passed over before the people. The sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh passed over armed before the people of Israel, as Moses had told them. About 40,000 ready for war passed over before the Lord for battle to the plains of Jericho. On that day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him just as they had stood in awe of Moses all the days of his life. And the Lord said to Joshua,
Command the priest bearing the ark of the testimony to come up out of the Jordan.
So Joshua commanded the priests,
Come up out of the Jordan.
And when the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord came up from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet were lifted up on dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before. The people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they encamped at Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. And he said to the people of Israel,
When your children ask their fathers in times to come, What do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know, Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever.
Wow, man! If somebody would just make a movie of that, that's like mind blowing, man. When you think about it, I mean, this is it's like a repeat of the Exodus going through the Red Sea. But my thought was, and I'm going to go back to
I got a lot of thoughts.
yeah, let me go to Joshua 3. And I want to just I did some quick calculations, but I want to see what a cubit equals
cubit.
feet. Yeah, I
Well,
know. It's like 8 inches, I think, something like that is typically.
Right.
I guess it depends. Cubic feet conversions. Let's try that. Oh no, that's a cubic, not cubit. Well, let's just say it's 18. So let me go back to Joshua, because I believe it is the the distance from the tip of your finger to your elbow. So it says the ark goes when they march out. You have to have the Ark of the Covenant has to be 2,000 cubits in front of you. If I'm reading that right, there shall be a distance between you and it about 2,000 cubits in length. So,
Right.
so if we do 2,000 times 18 inches divided by 12 inches to give us feet, 3,000 feet. They had to march 3,000 feet behind that thing. I mean, that's wow. That's showing some serious power. It's like, look, if you don't want to get hurt by this thing's got some power. And if I'm understanding the text, the Levites go out before them into the water, and as soon as they get to the Jordan, it says God, the Lord, Yahuwah himself comes down and stops the water. Well, I mean, if you're stopping a river, then if you don't have a reservoir for all that water to go into, it's just going to flood outward to the left and the right. So if it's not flooding outward to the left and right, there's no indication that it does. It must be going straight up. Either that or the water has to stop. And because if the water keeps flowing down from, I think it flows down from Mount Hermon. I think the headwaters of the Jordan, if I'm not mistaken, is there in the Banyas, which is at the base of Mount Hermon, Caesarea Philippi. Then you'd have this water wall just getting higher and higher and higher and higher. I mean, no matter how you look at it, this would have been a phenomenal sight to see.
See, this gets okay. In verse 7, Joshua is one of my favorite characters in
me too,
in Torah, because in verse 7, he's talking to Joshua. He talks to him.
Yeah.
And Yahweh spoke to Joshua, and then you move down. He spoke to Joshua several times through 3 and 4. So he's repeating. He's got this. It's like Yahweh builds him up into an ultimate faith.
Yeah.
An ultimate authority. The thing that gets me about the stones, the 12 stones.
Yeah.
You've been in that area. Is there any markings?
I was just thinking the same thing when I read that part here. Let me that's over in chapter 4, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, what does these stones mean to you? And he tells you, okay, this is where the stone, and it says, and they remain there even to this day. That made me question who wrote the book of Joshua, actually, because this seems to be indicating, if it was contemporary, well, big deal. In other words, if this was like a journal, written by Joshua, and we set them up and they remain there to this day. Well, because we set them up yesterday. You know what I mean? There's obviously some period of time has taken place between them getting those stones and setting them up and to the writing of this book. For him to say, and they remain there to this day. We read this several thousand years into the future from this time. Are they still there to this day? That's a good question. I did not see them when I went there, and I wasn't aware of anybody doing any tours to go see them if they are there. I'd have to wonder if somebody like Ron Wyatt or somebody who seemed to find like everything, if he found, I know that if it was him or somebody else, found the standing stones for where the Red Sea crossing took place, that I think Solomon erected, if I'm not mistaken, to say, to mark, hey, this is where it happened. I believe those have been found.
Okay.
But I don't know if this one's been found. But just looking at this, the way the narrative, I'm a visual person, so I'm seeing this, kind of cinematically in my head, going, "Wow!" I mean, here's this huge pillar of water, and if it just kept flowing, then it would have had to keep going higher and higher and higher. If it's not going out, to the left and right, like
Not only that,
water would normally do.
not only that, the priests stopped in the middle of the thing.
And they stayed there until all of Israel.
How many people was that?
Boy, that's a good question. Some say 2 million left Egypt, and we've got a census there. We got a couple of censuses, but they just primarily deal with fighting age men, or usually just the men. So, you can maybe double that, or maybe even triple it if you think about children. So I don't know.
That had to take
a lot of people.
2 million people. Just take 2 million people crossing it, and then you take the size of the Jordan and how long that would take. Would it take all day, 24 hours?
Well, yeah. When we were talking about the Exodus, the distance that they cross, if the Red Sea crossing is what the people like Ron Wyatt and others have claimed to be the site, it's a good distance of land to go across. And when you think about, men, women, children going through this thing at night with animals, and carrying stuff, it's not like you're jogging through the thing. You're walking through at a pretty slow pace, when all things considered. That would have been, we watch the movies and we see the Red Sea crossing, and it takes 10 minutes of screen time. We think, oh, wow, that's cool. No, this would have been like an all night, into the day major affair. And then you have a repeat of this going through the Jordan. So, when they get into the land, I mean, especially if this was a pillar of water that just kept going higher and higher up into the sky, at least that's the way I'm visualizing it. People would have seen that from all around, and heard of this group coming through with this box that they have to stay 3,000 feet behind. Man. And then if they set up this 6-story high dome tent to go along with it, they would have been a terrifying sight for everybody to see.
So they're crossing this thing. In chapter 3, Yahweh tells them, El is in your midst, and who he's going, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the president. So you got all these giants on the other side of it.
Yeah.
They know they're there, and only 40,000 men who bearing arms goes across, and they're what are they at that time? Maybe larger than Goliath, maybe 30 footers?
I speculate that, based on the reading of the text, the Amorites in Amos 2:9, a side of cedar trees, that's on the short side of a cedar tree would be 35 feet, 36 feet.
Well,
on the short side, Og of Bashan and Sihon weren't that big. They were, roughly 15 to 18 feet. That's 3 times my height. I'm almost 6 feet tall. I'm like 5'11". So, somebody 3 times, not just my height, but mass. These guys were huge.
If you ever get the time to do it, and I know you get a lot of projects and seed, we're desperately waiting. We know you're at work on it, but man, to have the tabernacle.
I want to show this.
And
I want to show this badly. And the way all these movies come out, and they take so much creative. I mean, you have to take creative liberty. I mean, you have to. We don't have every detail given for us. But what I don't understand is when you have such an epic story written as well as it is, and they totally destroy it when they put it on the screen. Not even close to what's written. I mean, even with the creative liberty they're taking, not even like the movie Noah. What a disaster. $150 million budget, Academy Award-winning actors, and they blow a story that every culture in the world has some sort of remembrance of. Oh, come on, really? Well, I'll tell you, brother, if I ever can get funded for all of this stuff, that would be my desire, is to, there'll still be people who disagree with my creative interpretation of it, of course, too. But I want to stick as close to the text as I can, even with, the creative liberty. Is just like, look what it says. This is epic.
I'm just thinking, you got 2 million people crossing, and it says Elohim dried up, meaning it was dry.
Dry ground. Just
wet,
like, yep.
mushy, dry.
Yeah, and a wall. I mean, I just see the water. If it's a river that's moving, and there's a block, that water just has to just keep going. Unless it goes up and loops back around, but then you just be increasing the amount of water that's hitting that barrier. Can you imagine being the Levites? You want to talk about? Okay, you're standing. You're the agent that Yahuwah is using. Just okay, you're standing there with this ark. Like, oh man, oh man! But what a testimony they would have had, because they're getting ready to go in the land and be His servants.
Right.
I mean, they're carrying an ark that requires a 3,000 foot, space behind, and using it to stop a water. Wow, man! I tell you what, if I was one of those Levites, I would be as sold out as you possibly could be. How could you not be after being used by God to see something like that?
I hate to get into it, but I know that's for next week. But the very first verse of chapter 5, always after you get through 3 and 4, chapter 5, it's like it blows me away. And it came to be when all the sovereigns of the Amorites, who are beyond the Jordan westward, and all the sovereigns of the Canaanites, who were by the sea, heard that Yahweh had dried up the waters of the Jordan from before the children of Israel. So they're sitting there going,
yeah, it says their hearts melted and there was no longer any spirit in them because of the people of Israel. They were all like, zoinks!
So you had these massive creatures
shaking in their boots.
Yeah.
Yeah, epic, man. Awesome. I want to depict that, man.
So, and not to get off topic, but seed and funding, and how do we help you in that endeavor? Because a lot of us want to see this.
Yeah, thank you. Right now, I've got a bunch of other things I'm trying desperately to get off my plate, because I know once we go into seed, that's my life for 6 years. I won't be doing anything but that. I mean, virtual house, other people are going to have to take over, doing this stuff when that's going to be a full-time plus job. So right now, I left my full-time job, good paying job with benefits and everything, April 1st of 2010 to do this. This was the vision that Yahuwah put in my head in December of 2009. Actually, before that, I'd already started writing it, but he solidified it and confirmed it in December of 2009. I started writing it earlier that year, I think March or something like that. Anyway, I left all of that to do what I'm doing now. And everything that I've done since April 1st, 2010, everything I've done has been to lay the foundation, the nonfiction foundation for seed. That will be the 7th year, this coming April. And so, I don't know exactly what that means. If I take it as a sabbatical, does that mean I'm done with my labors of building the foundation? And now, if you build it, they will come, kind of thing. That's the way I'm interpreting it. I don't know. I'm praying about that. I don't know if I'm supposed to just back off altogether. But I am, based on the things that I'm seeing, I think that my first interpretation may be the right one, that I'm done with all my creative labors in building the foundation, and that everything, because it's already starting, man. I just got sent the demo of level 1 of the video game by the guys that have been working on it. He's got it all set up for the Android. I don't have an Android, so he's trying to get the certification for the iPhone, iPad, and maybe a PC version of it. But we got the first level done in draft form of the video game. Once I've kind of picked through it and critiqued it and made any kind of creative suggestions and corrections that may be needed to it, then we'll finalize that and then start building the other levels and have several levels ready for the release of that game. Hopefully also by springtime, maybe if everything goes right next year. But what I'm planning to do, if everything goes right, is create a video with Rick Hummer. We've already outlined it. We've already drawn it all out. We got a chalkboard. We wrote it all out and brainstormed it, actually laid the music bed for it, and started working on the voiceover and stuff to basically show, okay, this is what we've done. This is what I've done, with all the scripts and the comic book and the video games and all the DVDs and movies, and not movies, but books and stuff that I produced for this to show, hey, this is what's been done in the last 7 years. All of that is for the purpose of making the TV series. You guys can help. Here's why I can't go to the studios. And I'm going to give all the reasons why I can't go to the studios. Here's why I can't go to an investor. I'll give all the reasons why that won't work, and say why this needs to be crowdfunded. And, I've got nearly 60,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel right now. Possibly by April, it could get to 100,000. If it gets to 100,000, all I need is $3 from everybody. $3 from everybody to fund the first episode. And my thinking is like, look, I've produced thousands of hours worth of content for free, gave it all out to you guys. Is it worth $3 to you? If it is, let's get together, let's join arms, let's make this happen. Now, I know not everybody's going to do it, but I also know some will do more, than $3, and some will do less. Bottom line is, I think now, it's taken this long to build the audience, but I think I have a big enough audience that we could, it's not just my project. At this point, we all have a part in it. That's why I call it seed. Do you want to sow seed into seed? And if you do, stand by, because I'm hoping to have a GoFundMe type of, I don't know if I'm going to use GoFundMe or Kickstarter or just create my own thing, but a crowdfunding thing, hopefully started in April.
I am one of the audience that watches you, and I have a family. We homeschool, and the programs that we watch were very selective. And we need a filmmaker out there that will tell the story in a way that's exciting, innovative, and is not your basic Christian movie. I love your rendition of the Christian movies that come out, but something that's going to catch somebody's attention and hook them. And well, what does that mean? And take them right to the scriptures. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you are you're my friend and all, but we need that. We really need that venue.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if you can see these books back here, but I got 3 books by Brian Godawa. This is his Primordial series, like Noah Primeval. He's got Noah Primeval, Enoch Primordial, Gilgamesh Immortal. Brian Godawa is a Hollywood screenwriter. He's a Christian. He understands all of this subject. There's no learning curve. With somebody like him, I wouldn't have to educate him on this. He knows as much or more than I do. He's got some great stuff. I want to also plug this book right here. He wrote some really good, he puts an appendix at the end of his book. These are fictional books, but he gives the nonfiction reason behind the ideas that he presents in fiction in the appendix of the book. And then he took the various appendices from the Chronicles of the Nephilim and put them all together into one book. So it's just that information. When giants were upon the earth, the watchers, the Nephilim, and the biblical cosmic war of the seed. Great book. You guys need to check it out. Anyway, I'm showing this because, I don't want to commit him to anything, but we have spoken on numerous occasions that I want to bring him on staff as a writer for Seed. He did it. One of the first scripts I ever saw of his that was produced into a movie was called To End All Wars with Kiefer Sutherland. Great movie. It's based on a true story of a prisoner of war camp during World War II. And there's some really powerful things that happen in that movie that it's all based on a true story, including, I won't wreck it for anybody who's going to watch it, but there's one extremely powerful scene. And I was like, did that really happen? And I talked to him about it. He goes, oh yeah, that really happened. To the people that were in that prisoner of war camp. But it tells a very powerful message of forgiveness and redemption in a horrible situation. And when I first saw that movie, and I knew nothing of Brian Godawa, I was just walking through a Blockbuster. I saw it on the shelf. I thought, that looks interesting. So I watched it, and I was like, wow. I said, I don't know if the writers of this movie were Christians, but that's how you need to do it if you're going to make Christian movies, because it's completely secular in the sense that, it's raw. It's what you see is what you get in war. It's not so sanitized, that you have to get a Dove Award to, depict something completely unrealistic. So yeah, there are curse words and things like that, but that's what happens in real life in warfare. That's just reality. And for redemption to make any sense, for grace to make any sense, you have to show the other part. You know, you have to show the darkness for the light to make any sense at all. Otherwise, it's just a boring story. You need conflict resolution, you know, and I became hooked on his writing after I saw that movie. And then I was asked to speak at a conference in California, and he was one of the speakers there. And so I got to meet him in person and put the pieces together. And I said, "Oh man, you're the guy that wrote To End All Wars." He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Wow, dude," because I've got a video out called "Why We Need to Be Culturally Relevant," which is also on YouTube. You can just go on YouTube and search for "Why We Need to Be Culturally Relevant." Anybody who's interested in what I'm doing with Seed, they should watch that video, "Why We Need to Be Culturally Relevant." And I talk about that movie. I think I did in that video, but and certainly in many of the other presentations that I've done, I've talked about it. And I told him, I said, "I've been using your work, talking about your stuff, and you know why we're failing, we as in Christians, to reach the world through media, and what we're doing wrong." And I felt like he was doing things right. And so I've been in communication with him off and on, and ever since we met in person. And last time I talked to him, he does this for a living, so he has to get paid. Everything I've done so far has been a passion project, just doing it for free. Nobody's been paying me on it, and anybody else has helped me. I haven't been able to pay them because we didn't have the budget for it. But he says, when you have a budget, come see me again. So if that is true, if he can in fact commit when I have a budget, then I am really excited, because he's already extremely creative. He's already written some fantastic fictional novels, and to have him on board as probably my primary staff writer, I think Seed can really be awesome.
I'm thinking Seed, and after we going through Joshua, there's so much that you could do.
Man,
so much that a storytelling that people would be involved and get them into the scriptures.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what it said?
Yeah.
Is that how it happened?
Yeah. And one other thing, I'll say this. If you read through Brian's, the stuff that he wrote in the appendix of his book, and if you read the stories, he wrote the stories from a flat earth perspective. And when I realized that, I'm like, dude, and he goes, he does not believe the earth is flat. Let me clarify that. He's like Mike Heiser on that. He does not believe that. So don't be putting words in my mouth that Brian Godawa, anybody looking for a soundbite, I do not believe, and I am not saying that Brian Godawa believes the earth is flat. However, he wrote his stories from that perspective because the people in those stories did believe that it was flat. And he acknowledges it, that the literature, not just the biblical narrative, but he uses a lot of Sumerian narratives and stuff like that to, make an authentic story. You can't go through the ancient world without seeing it. It's everywhere. It's all over the ancient narrative. And so, and I thought that was a brilliant move on his part to make the story extremely the Gods of Egypt, the Gods of Egypt movie was also written from that perspective, and they depicted it. And so, I like the way he thinks. I like the way Brian thinks, put it that way.
You had a good conversation with him. I think, was it earlier in the year that you had him on TFR?
Yeah, I think he's been on my radio show twice now, I think.
Did you have him back to back? Because I remember one show.
I don't believe they were back to back, but he's definitely been on once, at least once, I think twice.
Well, just the Joshua story and those things that lead up to him, the tabernacle that people saw, we're hungry for not only entertainment, but entertainment that goes along with our walk, our Torah walk. And we just don't have, there's only one that I've seen, and that's the Passover movie. Mm-hmm. Where you see the guy coming back to his family. He explains the Passover to his family. That's one of the better ones I've seen, realistic.
Yeah, but that was that's just a really basic, almost like a stage play story. But yeah, I mean, I want to have, just to be clear, when I produce Seed, I want it to look like anything else you're seeing on TV, from a production value perspective, which means we've got to have the same budget, and everything you're watching on TV, I don't care what, CSI or Fringe or whatever shows you like watching on TV, every hour-long show that you're watching has, maybe not every, but predominantly, the budget is between $1 and $3 million per episode, depending on how much star power is in the show and how much, and by that I mean name actors and how much special effects and stuff like that. But your typical hour-long dramatic television show isn't about the $1 million per episode budget. That's why I say if I get $3.33 from 100,000 people, I got 999,000. You know, I'm pretty close to there, and I've already got money been set aside over the last 7 years. People have signed up to be 333 subscribers. You know, they've come and gone, you know, over the years, but all that money is being put aside into an account specifically for seed. So, you know, there's something like 25,000 or something that's still in that account. So, which I've been holding on to because I may need to use to option a director or, you know, some of the major players to get them involved up front. So, all that to say that people who have already been subscribers, that money is still in the account to be used for seed, but I'm going to need to do a, you know, 20,000 versus $1 million. I mean, it's still a long way to go. But I think it's very obtainable. I think that the goal is a reasonable goal. And, you know, with the numbers of people involved, I think we can really do an amazing grassroots effort. And a good example of how that was done is a kind of a campy, cheesy movie called Iron Sky. That was, the premise of the film is basically after World War II, the Nazis escaped to the moon, and they've been camped out on the moon ever since. And now they've amassed a big army, and they're coming back to rule the world. So, you know, that's kind of the cheesy plot line. But from a production value, you know, the production value as you're watching the movie, the special effects were just right there with, you know, Independence Day kind of thing. You know, maybe not quite as grandiose, but still very good. And that was completely crowdfunded. And if at the end of the movie, if you watch the credits, it's like to everybody in the Netherlands, and it's like all the names, everybody in Australia, you know, all the names, you know, because, you know, if you contribute $3 to the project, you are a producer, you know. So, you know, we want to thank our producers, and you know, and I would love for that to be the case for seed, is just have a whole bunch of seeders out there that, you know, they're willing to put a little bit in, you know, without an expectation of return other than here's the product. Here's the product. Because the problem is, if I go to an investor, sure, I can go to an investor and raise $1 million. I've raised a lot of money before through investors, but you always have to give something up. And sometimes you have to give a lot up. You know, sometimes you have to give your creativity, where they want to censor you and control your content, and they want to guide the story the way, hey, it's my money. You know, you got to do it. The borrower is slave to the lender. You know, so, you know, I don't want to run into a scenario where somebody else is dictating how this goes, and they also demand a return on investment of, you know, whatever percentage. But, you know, when the return comes in, if I have to take that percentage and give it back to an investor, that's money that doesn't go into episode 2, and then I'm back to square one where I got to raise money for episode 2. You know, so if the money that we raise from grassroots can at least fund episode 1, ideally all the first 3 episodes would be ideal to really set us forward into episode 4. But regardless, I mean, if we can at least get episode 1 funded and then use the proceeds generated from episode 1 to kick into episode 2 and then perpetuate that, so that eventually the whole thing is completely self-funded. We don't owe anybody any money, and all of the money that does come in can go into the production value just to make it better. You know, because I've got 72 episodes outlined for 6 years, 6 seasons, 12 episodes per season. So
daggone,
that's the plan.
Well, I know, and I'm going to say it publicly, that Now You See TV and John Pounders has specifically said he has plans for Now You See TV as well. But I know he absolutely wants to partner with you in seeing this done. And so whatever we can do as, you know, as a channel can help you, we're going to do it.
Well, you know, we're going to have to bring this show to a close, but I don't want to hijack the whole show talking about the seed. But what we should do, especially as I get closer to April, is do a Now You See TV special just on seed, and, you know, really dive into everything that I just gave a brief summary on, and go into it. Because, you know, I really, we can do this. You know, I'm talking to the audience out there. We can do this, you know. And, you know, be in prayer. Anybody out there who is listening to this, you know, I believe that this has the potential to reach an enormous amount of people. And just to be clear, this is going to be a secular TV show. It's going to be loaded with biblical themed seeds for sure, but it's not going to be preachy. It's not going to be a Christian TV show. It's going to be a TV show for the secular audience, written by, predominantly Christians. Although I want people involved with the production. I want writers, I want actors, I want producers, I want everybody that you see at the end of the credits that are not saved, because I want to see what the production does in their life, not just in the audience's life. If you're married to a project for 6 years and you're working on it and this is your life, you're sitting there editing this thing for 6 years, it's going to have an impact on you, and so I want talented, creative people, saved or unsaved. I don't care. I want creative, talented people. Now, that said, I also need a team of intercessors. I want to have an army of intercessors, of born-again believers in Yeshua who are interceding for us, especially because if we are going to be attacking a secular market, and there will be secular people involved and stuff like that, well, there's bound to be conflict, But to be honest with you, I based on my experience on Facebook, I expect the most conflict to come my way from Christians. Sad to say. But my experience working with atheists and agnostics and just the secular world in general has been extremely pleasant, as opposed, unfortunately, to my experience dealing with Christian and even Torah people, especially when it comes to issues like some of the things we've been talking about. Some of the topics we talk about, a lot of people aren't on that page, and they want to call you a heretic and string you up, and so. And they don't understand what we're trying to do or what the impact is. We had somebody on this show, just on this broadcast, say, hey, I am a fruit of one of these controversial subjects coming into Torah. Well, just one. If that's all we got was just one, that's worth it. That's somebody who's going into the eternal kingdom. That's extremely valuable.
It got him into Torah.
Yeah.
It brought him into the narrow path.
Exactly. That's the point.
Well, I'm definitely going to pray about it. We're going to support it as a family. I guarantee that, because we want to see it. And I have kids, and I want them to have good programming that tells a good story that has a biblical foundation. Of course, it's going to be secular, but a biblical foundation that's founded in Scripture. Guys, we got to end this show because I've kept Rob long enough. If you want to continue the discussion, go to Rob Skiba's Virtual House Church Facebook page and just sign up. I mean, it's free for all. Just come over and sign up, and we can continue the conversation there. Rob, again, thank you for leading us in tonight's Torah portion discussion, answering all these questions and going through Joshua with us, man. It's really a pleasure to do this with you every Friday night.
Likewise, I thoroughly enjoy spending time with you and everybody out there. Thank you guys for your questions. Thank you guys who called in, so to speak, and shared your insights with us. That's what it's all about. Thank you guys. It's been awesome.
Father, just bless everybody that's been watching. Bless those who will watch later on. And we hope that you all have a good Shabbat this weekend. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
bless you and keep you. Yahuwah, make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahuwah, lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Yahuwah, make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahuwah, lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Yahuwah te bendiga y te guarde. Yahuwah haga resplandecer su rostro en ti